Scanning for audio.
Welcome to the Tin Dog Podcast, number 129, the Silurian Double. Ah, yes. But before I talk about two of my favourite stories from the Matt Smith era so far, I just want to tell everyone that I didn't win either of the Big Finish competitions. Yes, my script just didn't quite hit the mark. And the two short stories, well, one of them I'll be readapting to another script just in time for the next competition. And the other, well, that one I'll read out at Christmas. It's part of the Tin Dog Podcast Christmas celebrations. See, you're not going to miss out, after all. And also, my astrology project nears its conclusion. I can return to working on that novel. Ah, yes. That thing that all us sci-fi people like to go on about. The great unwritten novel that's inside us all. Or in my case, the beginnings of a trilogy. But let's not go there. That I'll keep you informed as I go. No, you don't want to know about any of that. You want to know about this.
It is. It's you two.
We can say hi to future us.
Amy, no! No! Her name's Alaya. She's one of their warriors.
One of you will kill me.
If she lives, so do Elliot and Mo and Amy, because I will find them.
My death shall ignite a war, and every stinking ape shall be wiped from the surface of my beloved planet.
We return their hostage, they return ours. Nobody dies today.
When I first saw the photographs of the Silurians, or whatever you're going to call them now, I wasn't that impressed. The old school fan in me thought just, well, oh look, they've changed it, just like they've changed the Dalek, just like they've changed a host of other things for no real reason, other than, say, to provide some new toys. I couldn't have been more wrong. They are lovely redesigns. The actors are allowed to perform, even if the actress in question is producing, well, let's put it this way, which accent was she trying to do? I know the TARDIS translation circuits usually kick in order to provide us with an approximation of English, but was she Norwegian? Was she Scottish? There was a bit of Irish in there. I'm not quite sure. You know, looking at her, an argument could be made that not all of the Silurians remained in hibernation. Some of them left Earth and became the Draconians. That's a piece of fan fiction for another time. But the design worked wonderfully. I was surprised by the absence of a third eye, but as the Sea Devils didn't have a third eye and weren't particularly psychic, that's fine. This story does slip rather neatly into two very, very nice halves. The pacing does differ from part 1 to part 2, and as I like to discuss them almost separately, that's what we'll do. Part 1 opened rather oddly. The whole getting out of the TARDIS and seeing themselves in the future waving back, you knew there was something going on there, something worthy of discussion or at least making note. You've never seen anything like that before in Doctor Who, and hopefully we'll never see it again. People from the future interfering with their own timeline, not even turning up to give themselves certain hints and tips. No, that just felt wrong. As to people asking where the Doctor was in all this, well, that's fine. He's dropped them off somewhere. It's 10 years later. They've turned up just for a wave. That I can completely live with. It's hardly a problem. Even in last week's story, the Dream Lord, the Doctor had left them, and it was 5 years later. Again, no real problems. No, it's as soon as you see the large drill and they're going down to the Earth's core that the first of the John Pertwee era echoes start coming back. Yes, in Inferno they get down, well, let's say quite deep. And here, apparently, they've got deeper, although, to be honest, I'm not completely sure. Let's just say the Earth's crust is differing depths at different places, and I can live with that. Of course we say things like these stories are love songs to the Pertwee era, but they're a love song to the classic era of Doctor Who, because at its core, this episode, rather than this story, deals primarily with what Doctor Who is best at above all else: base under siege. This is a church being attacked by villains who are coming. That I had an issue with. 10 minutes in order to set up all the video cameras and listening equipment. Now I know this is only set 10 years in the future, but I know for a fact it would take me more than 10 minutes just to find a video camera and wire it up. Never mind, put them all over the town. It's nice to see at this point that one of the main characters is dyslexic, something that's never been dealt with or even touched on in Doctor Who. It's nice that the Doctor gives him a bit of confidence and asks him to draw life if his life depends on it. Is this just to make the character more interesting? Or, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, something else? No, I truly loved the first part. It built its suspense well. It had very nice performances. Smith is working his way through some very nice references to the original Doctors, things like stepping over the holes like the Sixth Doctor does in Attack of the Cybermen, but still keeping the part completely his own. Is he aware of these earlier performances, these earlier nods and suggestions, or is it just his performance and we're reading these things into him? I just don't know, but it's absolutely great to watch. For me, the highlight of this episode, however, is the absence of Amy. She gets taken and she's missing. We're left with pure Rory performance. Very funny, very good. The guy is like Donna in the sense that he is the Doctor Who fan, someone whose Doctor Who has been in his life. The Doctor has been in his life all the way through, and he's asking the questions that fans asked the same way Donna did, but in a sarcastic way. Why doesn't the sonic screwdriver work on wood? That's a bit rubbish. Saying things like that always are the things which more developed Doctor Who fans come out with, the more sarcastic amongst us. I'll deal with the whole Rory storyline at the end as I talk about episode 2. The Homo reptilia, as people are insisting on calling them these days, are the single most human of Doctor Who monsters. Them and the Draconians are more of a Star Trek race than a monster. They have a point of view, an opinion, something you could reason with, an ideal to achieve. They are as flawed as human beings. They have what can only be described as, well, a point. And, like all science fiction greatness, they can be used to illustrate our own failings. The scientist who'd already done an examination on the father figure and was about to do the same to Amy, that's taken almost directly from Planet of the Apes and a host of other early sci-fi. But to many children watching, this will be the first time those concepts of, look at what we do to animals, if we were animals, would it be done to us? Although for me it's from Planet of the Apes. I know it's from other sources, and that's perfectly acceptable. And as long as those thoughts are raised in people's minds, it's well worth keeping it in. Because at its core, Doctor Who, as we've all discussed before, is a magpie of a programme, stealing plots hither and thither from other things and making them their own. Here, it's stolen from itself. It's taken the original 3 Sea Devil and Silurian stories, all of which have been previously discussed and reviewed on the Tin Dog podcast. Just scroll up the list and you'll find them. And making a new hybrid. The problem is, with these creatures, you can't do that much more with them. They are underground. They are under the sea. They do want their land back. They are our original landlords. They have got a point. They try and have a chat with us. They try and win. If they did win, we would be wiped out. I'll talk about that again in a moment. So in a sense, they can't win. And that is the beginning and the end of their story. So every time they come back, it must be a variant on the original tale. One thing that does bug me about the Silurians is that nobody's ever asked them what they call themselves. But I suppose if you'd landed in America and you asked an American Indian or Native American what they called themselves, you'd get a tribe name rather than a collective name for a nation. Of course there are things which are in this story which will affect part 2. The moment that the woman turned up with the enormous pile of guns, put them down, and one gun which looked slightly made by the effects department as opposed to all of the other guns which looked like they came from a museum, was separate and almost circled on camera, you knew that was going to be used. Now this female character I will talk about in a moment when I discuss part 2, but it's very important for the whole view of this whole season. And so I'll leave part 1, because there was some great acting, some great performances, and apart from the fact that Ms. Pond arrived saying she was dressed for Rio, and appeared to be dressed for Rio the nightclub in Middlesbrough, wearing boots, and all that was missing was a thick coat, I think we'll leave that there.
Hello, this is Nick Briggs, and you're listening to Tin Dog Podcast.
Before I talk about part 2, I need to talk about other performances or areas that you might be able to locate the Silurians. You see, it's not just the further 3 classic series Doctor Who stories. There is an absolutely superb novel called Blood Heat, which is set in a slightly alternate universe where the 7th Doctor arrives in a world where the Silurians defeated the human race and the 3rd Doctor. It's dinosaurs and London. It's a great read. If you can track it down on eBay, well worth looking up. Still quite good and written by Gary Russell is the 1996 book dealing with the 3rd Doctor and Liz, where they deal with a hybrid race of Silurians. This one's called Scales of Injustice. But if you're not a reader or you can't track down the books on eBay or even a second-hand store, why not try the rather good Jonathan Morris audio Blood Tide? That's where the 6th Doctor goes to the Galapagos Islands, where he meets Darwin and some Silurians. If you want something a little bit more, well, female-dominated, and we can talk about that very shortly. Professor Bernice Summerfield has got one story, the Bernice Summerfield and the Poison Seas. That's a sea devil colony on another planet. I've not heard that one. Again, another spin-off audio unit has got the coup in it. That's the very first unit story. And it's got Lethbridge Stewart facing some Silurians coming back to the surface. They've made many an appearance in the comic strips. In 1980, in Doctor Who magazine number 21 and 22, they were in Twilight of the Silurians. Now that's a brilliant story. It appeared at the back of Doctor Who Weekly. It was the end of the Silurian civilization, and they were just about to release their apes into the world. If you can track that down, it's very short. It's only about, collectively, 6 pages long. But it's a brilliantly written story and so gorgeously illustrated. In 1982, Doctor Who magazine 61, The Devils of the Deep. Again, there was City of the Devils, again by Gary Russell and Vincent Danks. That's in the 1992 Doctor Who magazine Holidays special. Sarah Jane Smith and K9 discover a colony of Silurians and sea devils in Egypt. In 1993, 203 to 206, The Final Genesis. In an alternative dimension, Homo sapiens and Homo reptilia live together in harmony. And then, from 1994 to 1996, Doctor Who magazine 215 to 238, The Cybermen. Revealed at last, it says in Doctor Who magazine, the evolutionary link between the Silurians and the Cybermen. I think we'll leave that one there. That one really is for the extremist fans amongst us. Shall we continue our review of the story? I think so.
There are fixed points through time where things must always stay the way they are. This is not one of them. This is an opportunity.
What are you doing?
Protecting our race against the apes.
The future pivots around you. Here, now.
This is war.
There's not a chance.
This ends here.
It only ends with our victory!
Amy!
Rory!
Don't do this! No!
On watching Cold Blood, the first thing that occurred to me was to shout, Marvin! Yes, Stephen Moore, the voice of Marvin, the paranoid android from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, played the Silurian leader. Why his opening speech talked about 1,000 years was really beyond me. Apart from the fact that, of course, at the very end you find out it's set 1,000 years on, which means they survived their hypersleep and then emerged, possibly to take their place amongst human race. Possibly not. The second part is very different in pacing, but I'm sure, as I have watched them back to back, it's not as different as it felt. Perhaps it's because I was so completely enamoured with the first part that I was expecting the second part to hit the ground running and keep going, very much like the Angels story did. There is something I feel I need to talk about with this story, in fact with this whole season so far. All of the females in this story were violent. They were dominating in many respects. Now, I'm sure I'm not particularly well suited to write some sort of feminist critique of the whole season, but as my MA is in media production, I'm sure I've written the odd essay in the past on such things, and would love to read somebody else's reading of such things. But let's look at it here. The entire caste, the warrior class of the Silurian people, are female. I don't think this has been gone into or mentioned anywhere else. Now, I know that all of the Stone Angels are also female. But in this story it is very noticeable. The female characters are driven by an overriding sense of family, of loyalty to what they know is correct, what they know in the sense internally is correct. The female human is driven to despair with the loss of her husband, her son, her father's being killed slowly with poison. She goes for the one thing she knows she can do, which is torture. She becomes the monster. She's taunted by the Silurian, another woman, into killing her in order to create the war, to give the warrior class, the warrior caste, a purpose. Knowing that her sister, why she chose the same actress to play both parts, is that just another example of very low budgeting? Or is it the more subtle they were family all along, thus making it so much more soap opera than Russell T ever managed? But even looking beyond that, at a different feminist critique of the whole season, Amy Pond as a companion is a truly interesting subject, choosing, in admittedly a dream world, to kill herself and her unborn child, as well as her career choice, and the much talked about jumping on the Doctor at the end of that rather nice Angels story. I'm sure I'll be able to deal with a much deeper critique of Amy at the end of the season. But enough media studies nonsense. Let's get back to talking about the story itself. Again, superbly acted, Matt Smith pulls it off greatly. Some of the little niggly points, like getting Amy and the woman scientist to represent the interests of all humanity, may need a bit of stretching of credulity, but the Doctor could have been playing for time, or indeed just seeing where things go and trying to be true to his Time Lord ancestry and keeping out of things, making the human race fend for itself. Yes, releasing the gas to kill everyone does sound odd, just like the end of Warriors of the Deep, but not quite. If you have some sort of cryogenic freezing stasis unit, you may want to keep other vermin out and keep the place sterile. So having some sort of cleansing apparatus to keep everyone in their place and keep microbes and organisms dead really shouldn't be a problem. No, my issues with the story are very small. Things like, why would there be a mammoth next to a small child? What sort of cataloguing system do these lizards have? The dyslexia isn't mentioned or gone into again. However, when the Doctor does say, why did you go off and form your own religion? I started shaking my head. Yes, you can tell people about things, and yes, you could start your own religion, but a religion formed by someone who hasn't trouble writing means it'll be a pictorial thing, and is more likely to end up as a comic strip. Does this mean that the kid actually could end up growing into someone like L. Ron Hubbard, or is that a different story for a different time? Although hasn't that been done by Big Finish as well, but that was spiders instead. Again, we're back to Stephen Moore. Oh, how circular Doctor Who truly is. Which brings us, rather swiftly, to the end sequence, and the vanishment of Rory. Yes, I thought she would remember Rory on the grounds that that's how the Doctor described how it would work in the Angel story, but no, there was some sort of get-out clause that meant she would forget him. But of course, his ring is placed in the heart of the TARDIS, which means that he will remember it. It's in a box that could destroy time. Now, isn't there mention of some sort of Pandorica opening, which is a box? But of course, we've now established that either the TARDIS is destroyed by the Pandorica opening, or more likely, in my theory, it is the Pandoric itself. You see, it's a box that contains the most destructive monster of the universe, and if anyone were to put logic to the side, you know that the biggest monster in the whole series is the Doctor himself. He is the destroyer of worlds, a man who leaves without a second thought. He is the thing most people should fear. So yes, when the box opens, i.e. the TARDIS, the monster is free, and he is the Doctor. Of course, it could just be a wild and wacky theory, or a new way of looking at the series. We just don't know. So when Rory died, and I'm using the word died with those little rabbit ears because I think he's coming back. The ring is back. The wedding date is the day when the box is meant to be opened, and I don't believe it's a coincidence. No. But when he did die, I thought of Adric, and thought, no, we had Adric for years before he died. His death affected us deeply. We'd had Rory for 3 weeks, and admittedly my wife was well taken with his performance on the grounds that he'd actually brought some life and some integrity to the TARDIS, as opposed to some bint with skinny legs, who doesn't seem to act and just stares. No, if anything, Rory's death is more like the death of Donna's memory, because Rory is removed from everyone else's memory because he never existed, which I always find is an odd thing. Because if someone didn't exist and he had an effect on people, say he helped keep people alive in a hospital, was that job done by someone else, or did that person die? I'm sure I'm reading too much into it and giving it far too much thought. And so, as I've rambled for far, far too long about a particularly good story, I'll play the introduction for next week's Van Gogh story. What do you mean Van Gogh? Isn't it Van Gogh? Well, let's ask the 6th Doctor. So, until next time, be seeing you.
To me, Van Gogh is the finest painter of them all.
Look there, in the window of the church. Is it a face? Yes. Not a nice face at all.
We need to talk to Vincent van Gogh.
Wakey, wakey!
There's so much more to the world than the average eye is allowed to see.
Monster could have done this!
The eyes without mercy.
If we're not careful, the net result of our present little trip will be the brutal murder of the greatest artist who ever lived. Can you breathe a little quieter, please? No!
I know how it will end.
Doctor!
Amy! No, no, no!
It will not end well.
You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.